So welcome everybody. Good to see you guys. Welcome, Helen. Um, and Tonight I wanted to make sure that we review the two kinds of statements that that exist in the context of debate in Tibetan Buddhism. But before we get into that, I just wanted to check in with everybody and get a sense of whether are there any specific points or questions or things that you'd like to make sure we review, because next time I'd like us to get into some new material that we haven't covered yet. I'll ask us to read the next chapter in the book. So is there anything that you would like to request we touch on tonight in particular? Or even anything that you'd like to request we do tonight in particular? Just see if I can fix my... I think it's as good as it's going to get. Wait, let me see if I can fix my sound. Actually, 1 second. Okay. Okay.
Well,
Like,
okay, and I said, okay, there was one thing I was looking, I jotted a little note, but I didn't listen again, but it was on selfless, because I think you said there isn't anything that is selfless, but
There
then
isn't.
there isn't, so there is nothing I can say that is not selfless.
Right.
Okay, therefore, there are 3 possibilities with that.
Between selfless and what?
Between if a challenger is doing it, like if you say like a dog and selfless, like
You say a dog and selfless, yes.
can you compare those two? Because selfless is everything, so they're just two
Right.
particles that you can compare.
Right. So the answer is yes, you can compare dog and selfless, because there is something that is both a dog and selfless.
Okay.
Like Snoopy, my dog Snoopy.
Right.
Right. There is something that is not a dog, but is selfless, like me. Right.
Right.
And then we'd say the real answer is between them, there are 3 possibilities without anything that is neither. Right? Because there is nothing that is a dog but is not selfless.
Right.
And that is nothing that is neither a dog nor selfless. Because whatever you can name, maybe it might not be a dog, but it's not selfless. It's not selfless. I mean,
well, it's always it's selfless. Everything is okay. All right, that's why I caught myself in a...
Does that make sense?
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
I didn't have a question, but then Maureen's question reminded me of a question that I did have.
Yes.
I don't know if this is a good time to ask it, but last week you said space was permanent. Yes. I was under the impression that there was no permanent anything at all, ever.
Yeah.
So I didn't know if you could take a few moments just to elaborate on that.
Sure. That's a common misconception, actually. And to be honest, I'm not sure why it is that so many of us, myself included, for a long time, have this misconception that the Buddha said that there isn't anything that is permanent. The Buddha, there are 4. Did I mention this last time? Maybe that there are 4 seals of the Buddha Dharma, right? Were we talking about this last time? There are 4 seals of the Buddha Dharma. So like there are 4 claims, let's say, that if a teaching agrees with all of them, then it's a Buddhist teaching. If a teaching disagrees with at least one of them, then it's not a Buddhist teaching. It's not a teaching that accords with the Buddha's Dharma. And the 4 claims, the first one is all contaminated phenomena are suffering. So that is not saying all phenomena. it's just all contaminated phenomena, right? And then there's a way to define what a contaminated phenomenon is, but it has to do with afflictions and so on. Then the second one is all compounded phenomena are impermanent. So compounded phenomena are phenomena that arise due to the coming together of causes and conditions. Whatever arises from coming together of causes and conditions is necessarily something that like only lasts a moment and then is replaced by something else in the next moment, whether it lasts forever or not. And then the third one is all phenomena are empty of inherent existence. You see, so these are broader and broader categories. Contaminated phenomena are in the nature of suffering. There's three possibilities between contaminated phenomenon and impermanent phenomena, right? Then all impermanent phenomena are, compounded phenomena are impermanent, right? And then there are three possibilities between that and phenomena. And all phenomena are selfless, right? So the things that, so now maybe perhaps this is where the confusion might come from. The word thing in English is used to translate the word bhava in Sanskrit. And the word bhava in Sanskrit refers only to functioning things, to things that perform a function, which are only things that have causes and conditions, which are only impermanent things. So you could fairly say, using the system of translation, that all things are impermanent, but then we're talking about things. We're not talking about all phenomena, everything that exists, right? So things that exist that aren't impermanent are things that don't have any function unto themselves. They're basically just conceptual abstractions. So things like the number 2, or the absence of elephants in this room, to use an example from the book. It's not like the absence of elephants in this room was caused by an aggregation of things, and then it lasts a moment and then it's replaced by something else. The number of teeth I have, it stays exactly the same without changing until it changes all at once. But it doesn't change from moment to moment to moment to moment. That's different from my age. My age is impermanent. My precise age is changing every moment. You see what I'm saying? Like not just the large chunks of years, but like my actual chronological age is changing moment. It doesn't stay the same 2 moments together, right? And when we say space in Buddhism, we're referring to what's more technically called uncompounded space. And so we're not talking about space, without getting into the physics of it, there are some kinds of space that we're not talking about. What we're talking about is the absence of impediment. So it's an absence of something. Does that begin to answer the question?
Yes, it's very clear.
Oh, good. Oh,
Thank
good.
you.
I'm glad. Sure. Okay.
So you said there were 4 seals, and
Yes.
I think you listed 3, or did I miss
Oh,
one?
yes. And then I said what 3 of them are, and I didn't say the 4th one. Oh, see, good. The 4th one is different. That's why, because for the point I was making, the first 3 were relevant. The 4th is different. The 4th is nirvana is true peace, which means that it means 2 things, I think. One is it means that when you eliminate the causes of suffering from the mind, then suffering can't ever reoccur, ever. And I think it also means that until such a time as you eliminate all the causes of suffering from the mind, then suffering could reoccur. So in other words, there can be some like really, really, really deep states of meditation, but they aren't true peace because you haven't eliminated the causes of suffering from the mind in an ultimate way. Does that make sense? So let's talk about the 2 kinds of statements. Does anybody remember what they are from the book?
One is statement of pervasion.
Yes, exactly. But let's talk about the other one first. Does anybody remember what the other one is? It's got a very simple name, he said jokingly. It's a copulative association, right? Isn't that what he calls it in this book? Or does he call it something else in this book? I might
Is
be
it
getting
something
my
else?
Statements of qualities.
statements of qualities. Yes. Okay. He made it simpler than in his first book. His first book is the thick debate book, which he wrote, and then he was very surprised to find that it wasn't enough for people to understand what was going on, myself included. And so then he wrote the second book and he changed some names around. So statements of quality, that is a clearer name, isn't it? So, so a statement of, maybe I'll just share my understanding of it, and you can please feel free to contribute and question. A statement of quality is when we take a subject, which is like the thing we're talking about, or the phenomenon we're talking about, or even more precisely, the selfless we're talking about, in as much as it could be something that exists or something that doesn't exist, right? And we make a statement ascribing some quality to that thing, some property to that thing, some technically predicate, some predicate to that thing, right? So, you know, like in regular English, it could be, it could take many forms. It could say like, John walks. You know, John is the subject, walks is the quality, is the predicate really that I'm assigning to it, you know, or John is walking, or John is 24 years old, you know, or, you know, John is a friendly ghost. It doesn't even have to be true, right? Because everybody knows John is a very unfriendly ghost. I don't know what I'm talking about. And so all that we're doing, this is interesting, all that we're doing with a statement of quality is just that, is we're just saying a subject, just like orienting the person to what is it that I'm talking about? What is the phenomenon or selfless that I'm talking about? And then what claim am I making about it? What is it that I'm saying about it, right? It has two parts. It has the subject and it has the quality. It also has a linking verb, like in the actual sentence that we say in English, which is technically in linguistics and logic called a copula, which is the verb is, typically. And the reason I mention it is just because that verb isn't actually adding anything. It's just a grammatical way of linking the two things, you know? So when I say, you know, John is walking, it's John and walking. Those are the two things I'm linking. And I say, John is 24 years old. It's John, 24 years old. The is just like the glue linking them together, right? Anytime I say that, the subject is a subject and the quality is a predicate, right? Because remember last time we talked about the importance of recognizing when we're talking about subjects and when we're talking about predicates, right? So my friend is John, right? There's now the subject is my friend, and the quality, the predicate is John. So my friend is John, my friend, John. This subject has this quality. You see what I'm saying? Remember too.
So if you flip that, would that be the same thing? My friend is John.
John is my friend. This is, I'm so glad you asked that, because no, in this tradition, the way we're using these phrases, that doesn't mean the same thing. Those things are not equivalent. Okay. In the particular case of John is my friend, we could deduce that if John is my friend, then my friend is John. We could deduce that in that particular case, but that's not always necessarily so. Here's an example. Here's an example. let me think of like a good example for this. I can think of some okay examples. Like a good example. Ready? Verb is a noun. Verb is a noun, but noun is not a verb. Noun is also a noun, right? Here's a simpler one, perhaps. Snoopy, again, I do have a dog named Snoopy. It's a real being. Snoopy is a mammal, but that's not to say that mammal is a Snoopy. Dog is a species. That's not to say that species is a dog. Right? It goes one way. It goes one way in the sense of, I think it's better not to think of it as like a little equal sign that only goes one way. It isn't that. It's better to think of it as it's a statement of a subject and the quality that I'm ascribing to that subject. That's what it is, you know? So you have to always be clear. What is the subject? What is the moment if I say Snoopy is a dog, and then I say dog is whatever I'm going to say next, I've changed the subject literally. I've literally changed the subject. So
Well,
if I tell you
compare,
17,
can you
sorry?
can't compare two subjects.
You can't compare subjects exactly. You can only compare predicates.
Okay.
So when you say, how do the two compare, X and Y, you're actually asking, how do the two compare when as predicates, when they're predicates. So basically you're saying, how do the two compare? Blank is X and blank is Y. So you're asking about what types of things can fill in the blanks. And remember how I said last time that one of the points that I said to keep in mind is that the word is in this tradition is always being used only in the sense of exemplifies, like is an example of. So I say Snoopy is a dog. That means that if you say, give me an example of a dog, I could say Snoopy. If I say a dog is a mammal, that means that if you said, give me an example of a mammal, I could say a dog. We're not saying any more than that with the word is. Just to be clear, we're not making all these things that I'm saying, all these rules that I'm giving, these are not some like great metaphysical rules or revelations. These are just like rules for playing the game, as it were, like rules for using the system, just so that we're communicating clearly. We want to be clear in how we're communicating. So whatever system we use in Western logic or in Indian logic, we need to know how are these words being used. Then you can find a way to say whatever it is that you want to say. You can say it using these rules so that it's clear what you mean rather than ambiguous. Because in English, we use the word is in such a way that if I made a statement just in general English, it would be very ambiguous, you know? And the fact is, we get into trouble. A lot of trouble we get into is because of that, you know? Anyway, before we talk about statements of pervasion, thoughts, questions, concerns, comments about the statements of association?
I guess a question came up for me. The statements of association wouldn't get into like any further complications, like adding an object that is associated. You know, like sentences have prepositions and other types of associations. Would it ever? Because I was also thinking like passive voice would mess things up a little bit.
Good
and
question.
other types of things. And
That's a great question. That's a great question. You can have a sentence that's as complicated as you please, as long as there's a clear subject and the rest, and then the rest is going to be the predicate, right? So if I say, the gate was closed at midnight, that's in the passive voice, but there's still a clear subject, the gate. I'm still talking about the gate. I'm not, if I were to change that sentence into the active voice, the guard closed the gate at midnight, now it's a different, I've changed the subject in this case. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And
So, oh, go ahead.
and then, like, if I say the gate, let's say the gate was closed at midnight by the guard, right? The gate is the subject, closed at midnight by the guard is the predicate. It's all one predicate. We don't need to break it down further. Sorry, were you going to say more?
I was just going to say that makes it really clear, and it is that strict. He was like strict to the grammar, like what the subject of your grammar is will be
Yes.
the subject of our analysis.
In fact, in Tibetan debate, this is so important that in Tibetan debate, the way you actually do it is you say the subject and then you say comma, the subject, comma, and then you say the predicate. And you always say the predicate in a specific way to make it super clear, okay? In just parenthetically, in English, the tradition has become, unfortunately, in my opinion, say the subject, comma, blank, comma. We put the subject, the words, the subject first, then we say the subject, then the predicate. It's a pity because in Tibetan, it's even clearer. You say blank, comma, the subject, comma, blah, 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 blah. But what can you do? And the predicate is always going to take one of two forms. It's always either going to be is or are, right? Or were. It doesn't matter the conjugation. Like all of that is irrelevant. It's just a copula. It's just all it's doing. It's connecting, right? Or it's going to be exists. There exists. Like there is, right? So, for example, the subject on top of the mountain. Now, you can notice that is in grammar, that's a prepositional phrase. Doesn't matter. That's the subject. The subject on top of the mountain, there is smoke, right? So in the first type, when the subject, when the copula is, then we're making a claim about that property is attributed to that subject. In the second case, where the copula exists or there is, right? Then we're saying that, within the context of the subject, that is an existing thing. It's not as complicated as I just made it sound. It's what it sounds like. It's really what it sounds like. The subject on top of that mountain, there is smoke. All I'm saying is there is smoke on top of that mountain, right?
So the word does not have the same weight. There's no equivalency in that word then, right?
Exactly.
Okay, it's just an example of without any
Exactly.
other properties to that word.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
That's exactly right. Yes. Yes. Any other property that we want to do, we'll have to say out loud. We'll have to spell out. So some of the things that in English we just say is, in this system, we'd have to say the subject, blah, 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 is one with blah, blah, blah. The subject, blah, 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 is mutually inclusive with blah, blah, blah. You see, all of these things in English, we just ambiguously mean when we just say is. But not here. Here, we're going to be very precise. Now, so yes, so statements of quality, what they're doing again is they're ascribing a predicate to a subject, always. That's all. Statements of pervasion, on the other hand, they're talking about two predicates. logically in this system, you can either take a subject and a predicate and connect them, or you can look at two predicates and compare them. That's all you can do. You can't look at two subjects. It's meaningless to look at two subjects. It's hard for me to explain why right now, but if you play with it, if you really kind of get your hands in it, you'll see for yourself why. You know, it's not just a rule. So a statement of pervasion is always going to take the following form. Whatever is blank is necessarily blank. Whatever is a dog is necessarily a mammal. Again, in colloquial English, we have lots of other ways of saying that. But in this system, I think it really pays to stick to the one form. Whatever is a blank is necessarily a blank. So whatever is a dog is necessarily a mammal. Whatever is a mammal is necessarily an animal. Whatever is an animal is necessarily a sentient being. Right? All of those things are true. Whatever is a sentient being is necessarily a non-associated compositional factor. Whatever is a non-associated compositional factor is necessarily impermanent. Whatever is impermanent is necessarily existent. Whatever is existent is necessarily selfless. And there we stop. Right? You follow all of that? Like, I mean, maybe not even every word, but like the idea.
Except that selfless at the end. You're not talking about the selfless in debate, selfless.
Yes, I am.
You are? Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. Whatever is existent is necessarily selfless.
Existent, okay.
You see? I could keep going, you know, with synonyms. I could say whatever is selfless is necessarily not a four-sided triangle. Whatever is not a four-sided triangle is necessarily not a married bachelor. Whatever is not a married bachelor is necessarily not the horns of a rabbit. Like I could go all day, you know, as long as I'm telling the truth. I mean, I could lie, but that wouldn't be very becoming, right? Now, notice that these two can only go one way. Like, I mean, that there is no, it's not necessarily so that these can go both ways. So whatever is a dog is necessarily a mammal, but it's not true that whatever is a mammal is necessarily a dog. Right? Because there are mammals that are not dogs, such as whales and cats and humans. So when I say whatever is a dog is necessarily a mammal, that means that whatever I could plug into, if I have blank is a dog and blank is a mammal, whatever I could plug into the first sentence, necessarily I could also plug into the second sentence. Blank is a dog. As long as you tell me something true that I can plug in there, I can just take that same thing and plug it into blank is a mammal. Whatever is a dog necessarily is a mammal. Whatever is impermanent necessarily is existent. Tell me something impermanent, it's an existent. Because if you say something that isn't an existent, then it's not impermanent. It can't be impermanent if it doesn't exist. Because impermanent is something that exists for only a moment. So if it doesn't exist, then it doesn't exist for only a moment. Right?
Could I ask a question that's sort of related to that?
Yeah.
thoughts, you might say, would qualify as a thing that doesn't exist, but they do because you experience them in your consciousness. So
The thoughts exist. The content of like what the thought thinks is it's thinking of might or might not
doesn't.
exist, might or might not.
So, but what then if that idea of the number two only exists in the thought itself? Meaning that so many of our ideas about whether or not something exists is in that thought itself, and we mistake the thought to be the existent thing, but without the thought it wouldn't exist. Well, wouldn't you be in that conundrum?
That's an excellent and very sophisticated question. And the answer to that question passes through emptiness, I think. It's very interesting. I mean, here's my phone, and here's my whatever you call it, my like AirPods case. It's a phone case, okay? Now we could come up with a new concept that refers to these two things exclusively, right? I could like I can't come up with a word on the spot, but let's call it you know FairPod for phone and AirPod case, FairPod, right? So I'm holding a FairPod right now, right? Now I'm not holding a FairPod anymore. I'm only holding half of a FairPod, right? Now I'm holding a FairPod again. I'm not holding a FairPod anymore, only half of a FairPod. Now I'm holding a FairPod again, right? So does a FairPod exist, yes or no? And the answer we would give in good look is yes, definitely. I mean, you can see it. You can see it. I can hold it. There are true and false statements you can make about it that anybody who knows what the word means would agree with, you know? So I do hold a FairPod in my, now that we've established the convention and we understand it, we can attest to the fact that I am holding a FairPod in my hands, and that now I am not holding a FairPod in my hands. You know, there's a truth of the matter and a falseness of the matter, or whatever.
Isn't that based on a valid basis of designation, though? Only because you gave it that quality.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right. And that's all it takes. And so now it's clear to us that a FairPod exists only because I designated it with thought. Until I had designated it with thought, there's no sense of what a FairPod is. You know, that there's nothing in these two things that was already a FairPod before I said it, right? These are two separate things that have nothing to do with each other. The concept of them being one FairPod is something I made up, right? But once I make it up, even retroactively, it still applies. You know, like I can say, you know, oh, earlier, like now that I've made up the word, I can say, oh, earlier today, the FairPod was sitting at the table. And it's true, you know. Earlier today, I couldn't find half of the FairPod, right? That's not true today, but it might have been, you know. But you see, but notice that's not true today. I can tell you that that's not true today because there's a fact of the matter. Now that there's a definition, I can go back in my mind and I can check, you know. If I explain to my husband what my definition of a FairPod is, I could say, when was the last time that I lost half of my FairPod? And we would both arrive at the same answer if we remembered correctly. It's not something that we're making up in our heads. Unlike Harry Potter, we're just making it up in our heads. You see? Or, you know, like the adventures of the little green elf who lives in the basement. There is no little green elf who lives in the basement. There isn't even a basement. So if I were to tell you a story, it would all be made up. Nobody could confirm or deny that my story is accurate. I couldn't say to my husband, oh, let me tell you a story about the little green elf in the basement. He'd say, like, and then blah, 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 blah. I say, like, no, that's not how it happened. I'm making it up, right? Because the little green elf doesn't exist, unlike the fair pod, which does. So there are things, so the fact that something exists only in dependence upon our concept, upon our mental labeling, even within that, there are things that do exist and things that don't exist.
And it's not to debate it, but it's to say, but then that would touch more on semiotics and a kind of relationship of like signed and signified rather than, I forget exactly what my initial question was, but I think it had something to do with whether or not that the thing existed, or that I forget what it was.
So once we've established what we mean by the number 2, then we can check whether it exists or not. We
right,
can
it had
check.
to do with whether or not that thing existed outside of anybody's thought. But say you invented the concept of number 2, and you did the same thing with the phones, and you didn't tell anybody. And so for sure, the number 2 would do the same experience. You even jotted it down on a piece of paper. And then you tore it up after you established it in your mind, and you and the number 2 are like really, really good friends, and you'll never forget it so long as you live, and you sing the number 2 song, and it's just fabulous life that you live. And then one day you die, but you never told anybody the number 2 song.
Yes.
So number 2 goes away as soon as you
Yeah,
die.
I understand what you're saying. Let me say this, and then maybe this might be a larger question, but for now, what I'll say is the number 2, here we go. The number 2 only exists relative to the concept of it. If there's a concept that I have, like the concept of a fair pod, right? Pretend I hadn't told you guys, pretend I'm the only one who has this, and then one day I die, right? Well, a fair pod will always exist only relative to the concept. So the fair pod will always have existed relative to the concept that I had. Dinosaurs existed before the concept of dinosaurs existed, but dinosaurs only exist or existed relative to the concept of dinosaurs. Well, let's put it this way. The whole reason we're doing debate is to understand that. So arguably, or at least one of the very main reasons, if nothing else. So
I appreciate you taking time to feel that a
course.
little bit. It'll give me
Of
something to think
course.
about.
Good. So any questions about statements of pervasion? One bonus like tidbit that if you feel like, oh, it's too much right now, then don't worry about it. But if you find it interesting, then you can think more about it, is that if we make a statement of pervasion, if we say whatever is A is necessarily B, right? Then we're claiming that, like, the implicit in that is that A and B either are mutually inclusive, or between them there are 3 possibilities. If they're mutually exclusive, then it's not true that whatever is A is necessarily B. And if between them there are 4 possibilities, then it's not true that whatever is A is necessarily B, because there are also things that are B but are not A. Anyway, it's just an extra, just to show you how these things connect. Now, with these 2 types of statement, with statements of quality and statements of pervasion, you can make any claim that you ever want to make. Anything that you ever want to claim, you can put in terms of these different types of statement, right? But it's very important to recognize which type of statement something is. And again, in English, and I'm not picking on English, probably every human language, but since English is the common language to us right here, in English, we play very fast and loose with that. We make statements of pervasion and statements of quality using the same constructions. And we just hope that context will make clear what we mean. And a lot of the time, usually it works, but sometimes we get lost and we get confused, and then it trips us up. So for example, if I say, every dog is, if I say, Snoopy is a dog, Snoopy is a dog, and then I say, a dog is a mammal. No, sorry, that's not what I meant to say. That's no, Snoopy is a dog, and dog is a species, right? Dog is a species. Snoopy is a dog, right? In typical English, we would say, oh, well, then Snoopy is a species, right? If Snoopy is a dog and dog is a species, then Snoopy is a species. Now, none of us would make that mistake, but we make mistakes like that a bunch. Throughout life, but especially like when we're trying to learn Buddha Dharma, you know, we'll hear things like, oh, like what might be a good example? I can't think of a good example off the top of my head right now, but we'll hear things and we'll, you know, like, for example, if somebody says, well, I don't know. I'm sorry that I can't think of an example right now, but the important thing is to be mindful of it and to look out for it. We need to be clear. Are the statements here, are they statements of quality or statements of pervasion? Because they're going to have very different implications. If I say Snoopy is a dog, a dog is a mammal, right? From that alone, it doesn't follow that Snoopy is a mammal. From that alone, it doesn't follow that Snoopy is a mammal. However, if I say Snoopy is a dog, whatever is a dog is necessarily a mammal. From that, it follows that Snoopy is a mammal.
But you know a dog is a mammal, so why can't you make that connection?
You can. It's just for the sake of the example. If you didn't know, in other words, if I said to you, Snoopy is a dog is a mammal, true or false, Snoopy is a mammal, you'd say yes, true, but only because you knew that already. You wouldn't say that because of what I just said. However, if I said Snoopy, if I said Snoopy is a Borogov is a pettylark, true or false, Snoopy is a pettylark, then you have no idea. But if I say Snoopy is a Borogov, whatever is a Borogov is necessarily a pettylark. Is Snoopy a pettylark? Then you can say, oh yes. If you're telling me the truth, then yes. You see? If anybody here is familiar with Western logic by any chance, that's what in Western logic we would call a syntactic implication rather than a semantic implication. Just in case you've come across that. It means that it doesn't, you don't even need to know what the words mean to know that at least logically it follows from what you're saying, that blah, blah, blah. You can't claim to know that conclusion is true, but you can turn it against the other person and say, based on what you just said, then it follows that this, and that, which is the whole spirit of Tibetan debate. You know, if somebody makes a claim that A is B, and that same person makes the claim that whatever is B is necessarily C, then you're going to say, aha, it follows then that A is C. and they're going to have to say, oh crap. Or they're going to say, yeah, it is, no problem, one or the other. Tell me what thoughts, questions, concerns. How is this sitting? How is this feeling?
So could you relate it to a question like, let's say a Dharma question, let's say Buddha is all knowing, or God is all knowing, or Buddha is God, God is all knowing, therefore Buddha is all knowing. Now, Buddha in Buddhism is not God, but yet you could make that correlation. You could say Buddha is all knowing, God all knowing is God, therefore Buddha is God. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I do know what you're saying, and that's a great question. And once again, you are just 2 steps ahead of us, because we'll get into that in just a couple of chapters. Really, what you'd have to do, no, that's great. What you'd have to do, that what you're doing is you're making a syllogism, which is what the next chapter is about. And a syllogism is a single statement that is going to combine a statement of quality with a statement of pervasion. And then we're going to have to look at what are the different ways to respond to a syllogism, right? Well, let me say this. Is it very clear to everybody the difference between a statement of quality and a statement of pervasion? And it's totally fine if the answer is no. That's why I'm asking. Like if you were walking in the woods at night at dusk and the statement bit your ankle, would you be able to tell whether it was a statement of quality or statement of pervasion? So you could tell the paramedics.
I don't know that. I don't know if I would or not myself.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I don't know either because I mean,
okay.
I came in the second class. So, you know, like I missed a whole bunch of stuff. I've done all the reading, but I don't know. It hasn't taken home yet.
Sure,
Or
absolutely.
taken up residence yet.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's
I mean, I
practice this a little
understand
bit.
it and I can read it, but it doesn't live yet.
Yes, definitely. Sorry, Maureen?
At least Helen has an excuse. Helen, we last class and we don't know, so you're all right.
Okay, let's practice this a little bit. So let me give you some statements, and please shout out, like if it's quality or pervasion. We can leave out statement of, just quality or pervasion. Okay. Buddha is omniscient.
Pervasion.
Quality.
Quality.
It's quality, right? The subject is Buddha, and the quality or the predicate is omniscient. Buddha is omniscient, right?
Spread throughout. I thought like pervasion means it's spread throughout.
Yes, but here specifically, we mean that it's spread. It's one predicate is spread throughout the other predicate.
Oh.
You see? So it's always going to be when we're talking about 2 predicates. If I say, whatever is a dog is necessarily a mammal.
Pervasion.
Pervasion, right?
Wow.
Yes. No, so whatever is a dog is necessarily a mammal is pervasion. Now, what about dog is a mammal?
Quality.
Pervasion.
Qualitative.
No, okay. This is simpler than you guys think. You know that game, like I like A, but I don't like B. And you have to guess, it doesn't matter. If you don't know it, then it doesn't matter. But I feel like we're playing that game. It's like there's a pattern and you just give a lot of examples until the person figures out the pattern, right? The pattern here is way simpler than you think. If I say blank is blank, it's quality. If I say whatever is blank is necessarily blank, it's pervasion. Okay? There's an asterisk, but we'll come back to the asterisk. Okay.
So would you say at this point, it's like the words that you use, if you just use the word is, it's always qualitative, but
Basically.
if you
Basically.
say necessarily, then you're getting into
That's
the pervasion.
basically it. That's basically it. Not because the words are magical, right? They're two different kinds of statement, but this system is codified in such a way that to make it really easy for us to tell which kind of statement is being made, we always use the same types of words. You see? So if I say, this phone is an iPhone,
Oh,
quality, right? If I say whatever is an iPhone is necessarily an Apple product,
Pervasion.
yes. If I say the Four Noble Truths are important things to know,
quality.
quality, right? If I say whatever is a first noble truth is necessarily in the nature of suffering,
Pervasion.
pervasion, right? If I say whatever is a compounded phenomenon is necessarily impermanent,
Pervasion.
Pervasion.
pervasion, right? If I say the Buddha is a being with 32 major characteristics and 80 minor characteristics,
Quality.
Quality.
quality, right? That
So it is
Get
as
it, right?
simple as the word
it's as
is
simple
and
as
necessarily.
yes, asterisk. Okay, I'll come back to the asterisk.
Okay, but for now,
For now, yes. I'll come back to the asterisk in just a moment, actually. But for now, yes.
So could you say, so whatever is a Buddha is necessarily has whatever 32 qualities, whatever you say?
yes. And then what are you saying?
Then it becomes a pervasion?
Yes, exactly. Here's why. In this system, the claim a Buddha has 32 major signs, and the claim whatever is a Buddha necessarily has 32 major signs. Those are two different claims. It just so happens that they're both true in this case, but they're two different claims.
can you say that? Can you just dig in just a little tiny bit to that specifically?
Yes,
The difference.
I will do that with a different example.
Okay.
A dog is a four-legged creature. It is not true that whatever is a dog is necessarily a four-legged creature. There are dogs with 3 legs. There's probably a dog with 5 legs somewhere, but you see? All that means is if I say a dog is a four-legged creature, what I'm saying by that is I'm saying, if somebody says, give me an example of a four-legged creature, I can say a dog. And that's a fair example. That fits. But I'm not saying that any dog you see or any dog you find necessarily will have 4 legs. It's interesting, I think.
Even if
It's
the
interesting.
exceptions are completely rare.
Even if we don't play around, we don't mess around. It's all or nothing here. Right? So here's another one. Here's one that I think will be very clear, I hope. Let me just think of how to do it. A human being. Wait, let me think. Well, no, I'm sorry, this isn't as much fun, but here's an easier one after all. I'll just go with one that I already used. Dog is a species. Dog is a species, right? But it is not true that whatever is a dog is necessarily a species. Snoopy is not a species. He's just a guy.
I think there you can't do that because I think you're changing the definition of dog in your two comparisons. So the subject's not the same.
It's because that's right. It's because that's the point, actually. The point is that in the first case, we're talking about dog as a subject. In the second case, we're talking about dog as a predicate. That's the point. When I say dog is a species, I'm saying dog as a subject, it is a species. It's a lot of things. It's a species. Meaning it's an example of a species. It's an example of an animal. It's an example of something that's furry. It's an example. Just what is dog? Not every dog, just dog, right? On the other hand, when I say whatever is a dog is necessarily blah, 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 then I'm not talking about dog. I'm talking about anything that is a dog. So Snoopy, because Snoopy is a dog. Lassie, because Lassie is a dog, and so on like that. They're two different things. And the funny thing is that in English, I'm putting it in quotes just because in Portuguese too, but like in English, we don't think like that. We mess around and we make mistakes.
I mean, a dog is not exclusively a species, yet the dog is in the category of a species.
Right. So when we say a dog, when I say dog is a species, when I say that, what I'm saying is dog is an example of species. So I say, give me an example of species. I could say wolf, whale, dog, human. Dog is a species, right? But it is not true that whatever is a dog is necessarily a species. Here's a very famous example from the Tibetan tradition. This is one that the monks learn early on. Definition is not a definition. However, whatever is a definition is necessarily a definition.
A definition is just a fact, you said.
Definition is a definiendum. Definition is a thing that has qualities. Definition has a definition, right? So definition is not a definition, but whatever is a definition is a definition.
Well, a definition is not the words that make up the definition for, let's say you said cup, a cylinder, there's a bunch of words that make it up, but in what I think you said last week but the definition is not all those words that make up what that
right.
cup is. It's the fact, this is the cup. It's a fact.
It's not exactly that. It's the qualities that make it a cup.
Oh,
right?
Definium is the fact.
Definiendum is cup. Is in my hand. The definiendum of what I hold in my hand is cup, right? The definiendum I hold in my hand is cup. The definition I hold in my hand is capable of holding water. Not exact. It's more complicated than that. Let's just say, right? How do I know that it's cup? Because it's capable of holding water. I see the property. I see. Not the words. I see the property of able to hold water. And thereby I know that I see cup, right?
So the word is not the definition, it's a word, it's a label. Whereas
the word is just a word.
This is the word, yeah.
Yeah, the word is neither a definition nor a definiendum. I mean, word is a definiendum, right? Word is a definiendum. But the word cup is not the definition of cup, and it's not the definiendum of cup. It's just a word. It's just something that we tie together.
Is the thing where you said that first example, definition is not a definition because definition is a definiendum in that sense, because when you say it there, it's an example of it's a thing in and of itself.
Yes.
What was the second one?
That whatever is a definition is necessarily a definition.
I want to think about that one because I don't get that one.
One example of a definition in the Tibetan tradition would be wet and moistening. Wet and moistening is the definition of water. right? So wet and moistening is a definition, and it is a definition. It's pretty trivial. Hot and burning is the definition of fire. Hot and burning is a definition, and it is a definition. I'm just saying the same thing twice. So of course, whatever is a definition is necessarily a definition. Whatever is something is necessarily that thing. And because I'm just saying the same thing twice.
But the only reason, I mean, it's laughable that you would say, hey, we're just being redundant. But the reason we're saying it is because how striking it is that the first one is kind of a
Yes,
contradiction. So you never have another example, but it's the first part that would require us to say the
That's
second one.
exactly right. Because we're so accustomed to making this mistake from the point of view of the system. And in fact, I think that, like, I have this pet theory that the first couple of years of training in debate, a big goal of it is to break us of this mistake, because it's so innate to our way of thinking, and it confuses us so much in subtle places.
But what is the mistake that you're talking about? Because I don't know that I know.
The mistake is in not in confusing statements of quality and statements of pervasion.
Well, it's almost like no one questions it. I mean, it's like so pervasive that we don't notice.
Yes, we need to be taught what the distinction even is, so that we can then find out that we've been confusing them all along. We have to be taught what the distinction is, then we need to realize that there is a distinction. It's not just something made up. Like, those are two very different things, and there are consequences for mistaking the one for the other. And then we need to notice, oh my gosh, that's right, I've been making this mistake all along. I'm sure I've noticed, like, important places, like if you start watching political debates of any kind on the street or on TV, you'll notice this mistake being made left and right. People talk past each other, and they're confusing statements of pervasion for statements of quality all the time. Like, for example, imagine if somebody said something like, the President of the United States, well, it almost doesn't matter how I finish that sentence, right? The President of the United States is blah, 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 blah. And somebody says, how can you say that when Trump, blah, 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 or when Obama, blah, blah, blah? So I made a statement of quality, and they're responding to a statement of pervasion. And whatever I say next is probably just going to add more confusion, because they don't realize that. Kate, were you going to say something?
I apologize for interrupting.
No, it's fine.
I'm wondering, because I was thinking about the number of times, this may just be personal, I've tried to, this may be a problem that I have, but try to convince people away from the idea that death is final, because I don't know, I'm obsessed when it is that people think that way, and I've just always been that way. So I can't, it's a bad habit. I just like try to like argue against it, and I have always failed. And I just like start thinking to myself, maybe the reason that I'm failing is because I can't do this. I can't think through statements of pervasion and quality, or I can't make good logical arguments. And I myself get caught, trapped, and I don't know what to say or do. And I'm trying to think of like, but what would be the common way that someone would make like a statement of pervasion that would be the thing you would try to prove against? Like, and I was trying to think to myself, some kind of a statement that would be like, all deaths are, each and every death ends up leading to an end or something like that would be like a statement of pervasion, right?
Whatever is a death necessarily is an ending.
Yeah, so something like that. So then in a system like this, that statement of pervasion, you would be trying to then say, okay, I recognize the statement of pervasion. I sense this statement of pervasion is false. I would like to disprove it somehow. But based upon what you were saying about the political debate, if I now throw a statement of quality or I'm not really careful, we're just going to start getting into a heated debate and it goes nowhere and problems arise and nowhere, we can't do anything. Well, what would be like, maybe it's just like what's coming up, but like, so, but maybe you could give a preview about like, so what?
I'll try. So yes, so what you're saying, that's again, that's the whole point of what we're doing, right? Like there are all of these tools at our disposal when we learn them, all of these tools at our disposal for proving things to others secondarily, but to ourselves primarily. Having a debate with somebody, like it's a service that they're doing for us to help us understand something. You know, that's the way it's looked at. And it's a little bit like Fräulein Maria from The Sound of Music, right? Let's start at the very beginning, you know. So first you have to know do, re, mi, and then you can put them together, you know, and you can put do, re, mi are just the tools that we use to build a song. You can put them into, and we make a melody, and then we can put one word for each note, and then we can have harmony, do, mi, so, re, fa, right? And then music, right? So in a similar way, we start in this course, we start with the comparison of phenomena, right? The four corners and the different possibilities. And we start with the two types of statements of quality and statements of pervasion. And where we're going to go from here is we're going to see how we can put together a statement of quality and a statement of pervasion into something called a syllogism, right? And then we're going to talk about how can we establish a syllogism to be true and what would establish a syllogism to be untrue, okay? Once we have that, then we're going to do a really cool little twist, and we're going to look at something called a consequence, which in Sanskrit is called a prasanga. So if you've heard the term prasangika, it's related to that. So prasangikas are people who love prasangas. You know, anytime you kind of go like this in Tibetan debate, it's because you just said a prasanga, you just said a consequence, right? And a prasanga, maybe getting ahead of myself, but since you asked for a preview, it's very similar to a syllogism, except you're not claiming that it holds any water. You're just pointing out something that would follow from what the other person said, right? And now they either have to basically it's a perfect prasanga when there is no way for them to reply to that without contradicting something they've already said, right? And
is there more weight with trying to retort with a quality versus a pervasive statement? Is
good question. Anytime we retort in debate, we're going to be retorting with a combination of the two. We're going to be retorting with a consequence, which is something based on a syllogism, which is a combination of a statement of pervasion with a statement of quality. That's the way it goes. And then because all of this is so precise, there are basically only three possible answers that somebody can give when the verb is fling, when we fling a consequence at them. There are only three possible answers. No matter what the consequences that we gave, there are three possible answers. The first answer is basically, oh my gosh, you're right. You know, I accept, you're right, you know. The second is, I'm not gonna tell you the terms that we use because it won't mean anything, but the second is, the statement of quality in what you said doesn't hold water. And the third is, the statement of pervasion in what you just said doesn't hold water.
You have to have a certain foundation of intellect or lack of ignorance in order to even start this debate.
Here we are creating that foundation.
Okay. Because if I don't know, if I just from lack of knowing,
Right.
I'm dead in the water in a debate.
Yes, exactly. But this is the fun of it. The fun of it is that these debates, unlike political debates, they're not done for the sake of winning. They're done for the sake of learning. You see? And so what you're supposed to do in a moment like that, if you don't know, is you're supposed to just pick one of the options and see what happens, and you will learn something. Right? It's a little bit like trial and error, and this is where you'll get the insights. This is where you get, oh, you're right, so it couldn't have been the one I picked, so it must be the other one. Let's try that and let's see what happens now. You see, it's a fantastic thing. It makes any possible argument, any possible proof, any possible line of conversation into a binary type of deal. At any point, well, maybe trinary, it depends on your reckoning, but like, let's say at any point, there's only 3 ways you can go. And then you retrace your steps, and then you can try another one, and then you retrace your steps and you can try another one. So there's no leaf left unturned. There's no corner left unexplored. And then you can end with a great deal of certainty. You know, you can say, okay, it couldn't be this because of that. It couldn't be this because of that. So it has to be this. It's really cool. It feels cooler and cooler the more we go. Because in the beginning, you just hear this and it's kind of like, if anything, you're kind of taking it on faith. But you'll start to see for yourself the mechanism at play, you know?
Yes.
I think I was going to say something else, but I forgot. Well, any other questions at this point, or thoughts or observations?
So you can use this form of reasoning to both prove something that's true and prove something that's not true if you're a really good debater.
Yes. 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 To prove something that's true, to prove that the reason the Prasangika school is called the Prasangika school, it has a lot of things that are unique to it, okay? But it's named after one of the things that is unique to it, which isn't the most consequential one that's unique to it, ironically, because consequential. But anyway, one of the things, so all the other schools would say this: to prove something is true, first you can use consequences, but at the end you have to use a syllogism. The Prasangika school says, no, you can prove that something is true just by using consequences all along. Because then the other person, when you get to the end of all of that, the other person will on their own kind of see, oh, then it must be this, right? That's not what's so special about the Prasangika school, but that's why they're called that, because prasanga is consequence. So you can prove that something is true just by using consequences all the way through to the end. Right? That's one of the unique claims of Prasangika, and so that's where it gets its name. It's the highest school of Buddhism. But yes, like you can prove that something is not true, or you can prove that something is true. Now, in some cases, I think in some cases, I think that might require you switching roles. You go from being you can, to prove that something is, if you're the defender, you can't prove that something is true. But if you're the challenger, you can. But that comes later. It doesn't matter. The answer to your question is yes. Let me just come back to the asterisk that I mentioned before, right? Earlier, I said that whatever is a statement of quality is always going to be blank is blank. And whatever is a statement of pervasion is always going to be whatever is blank is necessarily blank, right? And I put an asterisk at the end of that. And that asterisk is just to highlight once again that in common speech, that's not necessarily so. That's one of the things that's cool about the system, is that we're making it so. We're kind of all agreeing that if I mean a statement of quality, then I'll do it this way. If I mean a statement of pervasion, then I'll do it this way, so that we can all be on the same page about what I mean, right? But in daily life, you'll hear people make these statements every which way, right? So to figure out which is which, you have to ask yourself, you have to put it in your mind, you have to reframe it in your mind and see which of these forms would it really fit under. So for example, if I said all dogs are mammals, right? What I'm really saying in the system is whatever is a dog is necessarily a mammal. Like each and every dog is necessarily a mammal, right? That's a statement of pervasion. I'm actually comparing two predicates when I say that. But if I say, love is the answer, whatever the question is, I don't know, but love is the answer, right? That's a statement of quality.
So if you get to a point where you just really don't know, like the actual quality of what you're talking about, or you're confused, I guess what you're doing is you're teasing it out with each other to challenge. And so something else comes in, you think, oh, I never thought of that way. And then something else comes up and says, whoa, well, what
Yes.
about this has to do with, okay. So you're saying,
Yes.
if you both don't know, maybe at the end result of maybe, your lack of knowing what a mammal is. So
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right. So one possible outcome of a debate is that you might realize what it is that you don't understand, which is really cool. So like my dad and I once had like a little play debate like this. I forget what the original question was. The original question had nothing to do with this, but I know that we ended up realizing that neither of us knew what the definition of mineral was. That had nothing to do with where we started from. It was something about birds, I think. And so we had to look it up. We had to look up, like, what does mineral mean? And it turns out that because we were kind of, at one point we were kind of arguing, like it would seem like past each other, until the debate kind of made us realize exactly what the question was. And the question turned out to be that we had different definitions of mineral and we didn't know. And when we looked it up, the dictionary said in English, mineral can mean one of two things. One was what I thought, one was what he thought. You see, and that clarified the question for us. Without the system, we'd have talked forever. Yeah. So recap, okay? Let's do a quick recap of the important points so far. Let me pull up. Where is it? Here we go. So 5 things that I said last time, I'll just say them real quick again now. Very important to keep in mind when we're saying something as a subject versus when we're saying something as a predicate. We're not used to doing that. Again, that's one of the main points of the introductory part of this. Am I saying it as a subject or am I saying it as a predicate? Not interchangeable. Things that are true of something as a subject are not necessarily true of that thing as a predicate. Things that are true of something as a predicate are not necessarily true of that thing as a subject, right? The second thing to keep in mind is that the word definition and the word definiendum in this system don't mean what they mean in English. You don't have to worry about it for the word definiendum, probably because you've probably never heard that word before, so you don't have a mistaken idea, or not a mistake, you don't have a different idea of what it means. But definition, definiendum is talking about an object that has certain defining characteristics, and definition is talking about the defining characteristics of that object. But we're talking about the defining characteristics themselves, not the words that refer to those characteristics, right? The third thing is that my suggestion is not to worry too much about the English renderings in terms of saying an article before the thing or not, like a dog versus the dog, like just say it however it comes out naturally. Stay clear on whether you're thinking of a subject or a predicate. Don't try to get the articles right for that, and don't try to let the articles do that work for you. I think that spells disaster. Yeah, Jenna?
Last time at the beginning you reviewed and you said there were 4 points that you summarized. Would it be possible for you to, or too much trouble for you to make that into like a handout, or simply write them out?
Oh, sure, I can do that. I can try to do that. Yeah, there was 5, so all the more reason to do it. And it's the ones that I'm reviewing right now. But I should probably, yeah, I can send that.
Thank you.
So sure. So just to keep going for now, the 4th one is the word is. Once again, the word is always means exemplifies, like is an example of, like is something that you could say if somebody asked for an example of, right? And the 5th one is what is the actual subject that we're talking about? And that's a really difficult one. That takes a long time to understand. I can't claim to have fully understood it. I feel like I'm at a place where I kind of know it when I see it, but I can't quite necessarily put my finger on it. But in terms of making a statement of quality about a subject, if the subject is something concrete, then just look at it yourself, or listen to it yourself, or smell it yourself, or introspect it yourself, or whatever the case may be, and just check whether that quality is there. So for example, this cup is full of water. To see, that's a statement of quality. To see whether that's true or not, just look at the cup, right? Simple. You don't have to think, But if the subject is an abstraction, if it's an abstract term, then you have to look at the concept, right? But the subject itself isn't the concept. The concept is just pointing at the subject. That's the mysterious sounding part.
So like
But
if you
if
were
I-
talking about the molecules of the cup, it's abstract.
I would say that the molecules are still concrete, even though we can't look at it directly. What I mean by abstract would be something like definition, or even the number 2. The only way that I can say anything about the number 2 is by means of looking at my concept of the number 2, which I think goes back to Kate's point from before, And yet, when I say the number 2 is this and this and this, I'm not saying my concept of the number 2 is this and this and this. I'm saying the number 2 itself is this. So I have to look at my concept to deduce something about the number 2 itself, whatever that is, right? It's only if there is no number two itself, then we'd say that it doesn't exist, but there is a number two. I'm not talking about the Platonic form, none of that. It's subtle. It's very subtle and very tricky, but I'll just leave it there for now. And then today I just want to add the two things, which are number one, that the two kinds of statement, which are number one, statements of quality, blank is blank, or blank exists blank, like on blank, at blank, in circumstance blank, there exists blank, right? That's a statement of quality also. And statements of pervasion, which are about connecting two predicates. And the way we do that is by saying whatever is blank is necessarily blank. Statements of quality connect a subject to a predicate. Is that all clear? Ish? Cool. Cool. All right. So, here's another example. The apostles are 12, right? The apostles are 12. That's true. But it is not true. It is not true that whatever is an apostle is necessarily 12. That's just not true. The members of the class are many, but it is not true that whatever is a member of the class is necessarily many. Right? Okay. So what I'll ask everybody to do for next week is to read the next chapter, which is the chapter on syllogisms. I believe we've read up to chapter 5, right? The next one is chapter 6, right? Yeah, that's what I thought. So chapter 6.
Oh, you read up to chapter 4. I mean, through chapter 4. We're up to chapter 5, no?
I thought we were, do you have the book right in front of you?
Yeah, it's 1 to 5. And now.
Yeah. Now we're moving on to, what was the title of chapter 5?
Two kinds of statements.
Yeah, so now we're moving on to chapter 6, which should be the syllogism, right?
Okay, so 5 and 6.
I think the
Okay.
first time you did it, it was only 4 chapters, but this.
Oh
time
yeah, that's
it's
right.
5.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. All right, so let's end with dedication. And we can start by thinking in terms of a statement of pervasion, by thinking whatever is a decision we made in the time we were together is necessarily something that left an imprint in our mind. Whatever is a decision we made in the time we were together, however small, however tiny, is necessarily something that left an imprint in our mind. And so we wish like this: may it be the case that whatever is an imprint that was left in our mind is something that will ripen only in ways that will bring us closer and closer to enlightenment, so that we can be of benefit to all beings. To put the same exact thought, just to put it in slightly more common terminology, we can think, may all the imprints that were left in our mind through all of the actions that we did tonight, may all of these ripen in ways that will bring us closer and closer to compassion, loving kindness, bodhicitta, and also deep wisdom of the nature of reality, of cause and effect, of skillful means, so that we can bring all universal sentient beings to perfect enlightenment. May it be the case that whatever is a sentient being is necessarily something that will soon be perfectly enlightened, thanks to our effort. All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. I hope you guys have a great week.